Well, last night, President Trump delivered what he calls really big news related to election security from the White House. It comes amid a push to enact stronger voting restrictions before midterm voting kicks off. And Fox News' Jared Halpern reports from the White House.
Good evening.
President Trump making a primetime address to the nation Thursday night with what he alleges is new evidence of interference in the 2020 election.
The People's Republic of China carried out what is believed to be the largest compromise of election data in history. China's activities even included an attempt to manufacture illegal ballots for Joe Biden.
The White House says the new findings come from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. The president has long alleged without evidence there was widespread fraud in the 2020 election. Numerous audits and recounts have turned up no evidence of wrongdoing. The president also faced his own indictments alleging he interfered in multiple states.
I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have.
But the cases were tossed out after the president won in 2024. President Trump has also dismissed previous accusations of foreign interference in elections.
The Russia hoax, probably the greatest hoax in the history of our country.
The president has been pushing Republicans all year to pass the Save America Act. The bill includes a national voter ID law and requires a birth certificate to prove citizenship to register to vote. Democrats say the president is trying to cast doubt on the upcoming midterms.
And it's the same tired, old lies about the 2020 election that no one has bought for 6 years. But he's going back to them because he is just so afraid of what's going to happen in 2026.
And even some Republicans are frustrated by the president's efforts to relitigate 2020.
Anytime you're looking back, you're not looking ahead, and I'm looking ahead to these elections, and the president should as well.
Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Georgia's been a focus of the president's concerns over the 2020 election. He's long maintained the state was stolen from him, but has never been able to prove those allegations. Good Day's Mark Tigner is live at the state capitol with a look at local reaction to the president's speech. Mark, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Buck. Georgia not mentioned specifically in that speech. Spent most of it training his ire at China and what he called the deep state. But as you mentioned, Georgia has been not just a focus, or borderline obsession with President Trump in the 2020 election, which you might recall he narrowly lost to former President Joe Biden. This despite the fact that President Trump and his allies had a number of different lawsuits that they put in place, and none of them successful in their attempts to try to overturn those results. He also leaned pretty heavily on state officials to try to get them to do the same, again, unsuccessfully. But his efforts to try to change these results haven't ended. In fact, during his second term, you might recall just a few months ago, the FBI actually went to the Fulton County election hub and seized some election data, hundreds of boxes worth. We're talking about ballots as well as other voter information as part of a criminal probe. The Fulton County folks say that they've done absolutely nothing wrong, and they are trying to fight in court to get those ballots back. So we talked with some of the analysts on both sides of the aisle about what they had to say of the president's speech.
If you thought that there were issues with the 2020 election before, I think you certainly are going to have more reason to believe that.
We must win in November in such convincing margins so as to not allow the president to step in and say there was some form of cheating.
Yeah, and in wake of the president's speech, Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, released a statement. I'm going to read part of it to you. It says the Peach State remains the gold standard for those who want secure, accessible, and fair elections. Now, the president also brought up the issue of non-citizens voting, and we're going to talk about that issue coming up in the next half hour at 6 o'clock. Reporting live from outside the state capitol in downtown, I'm Mark Tigner for Good Day Atlanta.